Welcome to Inside Sim Racing and our first look of the dirt late model around Volusia in iRacing. Here we are in the late model around Volusia in iRacing. One thing of note that this is a pre-release build of iRacing Dirt, so things are subject to change. So, Billy, what is the key to getting the late model around Volusia?
Well, I think initially, Volusia itself is an interesting track because it has a very round, more like a D-shaped back straightaway, where we're used to in NASCAR seeing the D shape in the front, like at places like Atlanta and Charlotte and stuff. So the D shape, again, this is a half mile, but it's in the back straightaway. So it changes how you enter and exit 1 and 3, and then off of turn 4 and 2. The biggest thing is I had you start in the 305 last night, and the late models are a little different than what we did prior with the street stock and the truck, because it has physically more mechanical grip. The suspension geometry is unique in this car. The left rear, I'm not a dirt late model driver. I've never driven one. My knowledge is tertiary on these cars, but the left rear basically hikes up underneath the car, providing it essentially lets you drive the car straighter, for being very reductive about it. There's more to it than that, but starting with the 305 gets you a good idea about how to get around the track and the line to take to keep your momentum up. How does this one differ than the other two vehicles that we drove and the track?
Yeah, this one, at least when you start off with the slower model, you're flat-footing it. You're flat-footing it. You are pointing towards essentially the apex, the inside wall, being turn 1 and 2 here at Volusia, and you're just shooting and you're going, and it's, to some degree, it's almost, once you've done the other two cars, it's very intuitive. You just go and you shoot for that apex. The car goes sideways, gets into a nice planted feel, and then you're full throttle off, like full throttle in, around the whole thing. But it really does come off the corner a lot nicer, and it really becomes keeping the momentum up in this car, because you can really bog down. It actually kind of reminded me a bit, even though it's a completely different car, of an Indy car around an oval, where it becomes, to some degree, keep the revs up, keep it moving. Don't lose that momentum,
right.
and it becomes it's a momentum car. But I will say, Volusia, probably maybe my favorite track of all four. Like, it is very unique, and it's really fun to come off of turn 2 and take that wide sweep and make sure you don't hit the guardrail opening.
Yeah, yeah, that's the biggest key. And going from the 305, and then we kind of bypassed the middle version, which is a larger engine. Then we went to the super late model, and I had you do that. Again, we're using both these scenarios at a 0% track state, which is tacky. That means it has the most grip. And the reason I was trying to teach it to you this way is I didn't want to overload you, number one. And I would suggest, again, if this is your first time doing any dirt stuff, use the 0% track states. It's going to help you get to grips with the car, and then you can work yourself into using the other track states for a drier condition. But we went back to the super. How does that feel compared to the 305, especially trying to get around Volusia, which coming off of turn 4 is tight? You have this nice round arc to the back straightaway, and all of a sudden it gets tight coming off of 4, and then going into 1, it's tight because you're going from a flat straightaway in it, and so that turn is fairly tight going in. How did the super change the way you attack the track?
Things definitely happened a lot quicker. It was still, in theory, the same way of driving it, where you really want to try to stay on the throttle the best you can, but there were some times where I wasn't able, I had to lift some coming off the corner. I had to kind of feed the throttle back in, especially saying coming off of 4. And I mean, not just at Volusia and in this car, but all this dirt content, I really learned that, coming off the corner, that whole thought process happens mid-corner. Like mid-corner, you're deciding how much throttle to feed, because when you get into these higher horsepower cars, coming off the corner, if you go and you're at partial throttle, and then you go flat out, you'll kick the back end out. And there's a wall there because you're sliding the entire time coming off the corner, and then you're going to go and tag the wall, and maybe if you're lucky, you can get away with it, but then it messes up your corner entry into, say, turn 1.
Yep, changes everything.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's still the same concept of driving, and I hope while you're watching all these dirt videos, you're really paying attention to the throttle and brake input, because you drive these cars with your feet. I mean, it really is, that's how you drive these cars. It comes down to what you're doing with your feet, and I feel like your hands kind of go with it.
Well, yes, and speaking to the feet part, with the Super around here, using the brake to change the attitude of the car going into the turn is also, a key thing. Where with the street stock, I wanted you to kind of lift and pitch the car. The late model, especially the Super, because it has more power, trying to drive it as straight as you can with as little angle to the car possible is going to be the fastest way around the track. You're not spinning the tire as much, you're not losing that forward drive, and you're not killing momentum. So again, the hardest part for most people is actually not entering the corner with enough speed. Being shallow, lifting off the throttle, kind of trying to steer the car in. Be aggressive. Drive that thing on into the turn. It'll tell you if you've gone too far. I mean, you'll slide up the track or it'll spin out, whatever. And using the brake to help steer, it sounds weird, but using the brake to help steer the car entering the turn is a big key, especially around Volusia because of that tight entry into 1. And then like mid-corner 3 and 4, you've got to get that car bent. You've got to get it bent coming onto the front straightaway. Then as you transition to a dry track around here, there's going to be several different lines to run because of the uniqueness of this track. And there is sometimes you can kind of feel the cushion. In other words, there's the dark part at the outside of the track. The right rear is going to dig into it, and it's not dry there, obviously. It's got like we won't be able to see it because that's not how it's modeled, but the color transition will give you an idea of the right rear getting bite, and that will also change. So you're going to have to move around some. And changing the arc through the corner, one of the things I learned in driving a sprint car is when I was on the outside, I had to make sure that my eyes were going, it sounds weird, going both directions. Checking down below, making sure nobody's going to slide up into me, but also watching the outside, because you kind of draw a line mentally with where the right rear is on the track going through the corner, especially when you're on the outside or you're trying to hit a very specific line with the right rear. When you're on the bottom, it's more traditional. You're going to kind of focus towards the bottom, and as you come off the turn, you got to pay attention if somebody's on the outside of you. But when you're on the outside, it is a little more unique in that respect, where you've got to really watch that, have that mental note of where the right rear is. And I know we were kind of Kyle Larson and Kyle Bushing it every once in a while on the outside tagging, and that's the thing, is you've got this big, it's not a small car, and it's hanging out behind you, and that can catch you out coming onto the straightaway, or even just entering the corner, actually tagging them back into the car.
Yeah, that rear quarter panel is almost truck-like in length, where yeah, it's there, and you just gotta always have it in your mind that it's there. But unlike the trucks, it felt like you had to be careful. Like, you just had to be careful, and everything was just, really sensitive with the inputs of getting into the corner and getting back on the throttle. With this car, you can kind of you feel like you kind of manhandle this. Like, this is
Yes.
getting into more of like, okay, this was meant to be on dirt, and you can go and drive this thing hard, and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, the suspension technologies in this car, and the Super, all the late models, but when you combine the power of the Super with the suspension technology that they have in this car, it's pretty amazing. And these type of cars are going to feel like they have way more grip than the other two cars that we've talked about in prior videos. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about the differences of how the car enters and the grip level that these cars will have in comparison to the street stock in the truck. Truck.
Yes. So I think that will do it for our look at the late model at Volusia. Again, this is a super fun combo, and it's also nice with the 3 different tiers of late model. You can start off slower, get used to the track and how the driving feel, and then work your way up for a little more horsepower. So with that said, thank you for watching Inside Sim Racing. We'll see you guys next time.